Nothing to do with crime, nothing to do with policing. And like day one, page one, you're met with basically some propaganda. And this was 2001. And it hasn't got better. I can assure you it didn't get any better. And they said, stick your hand up if you think two-tier policing is a thing. And every single person stuck their hand up.
Really?
And these are all police officers.
Really?
When you hear senior officers say now, we police without fear or favour, I mean, that's blatantly untrue. I mean, they might genuinely believe it, but they're very, very badly mistaken. They go, no one's going to stick up for these people because they're white and they're working class.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Peter Whittle. Now, as you will know, if you watch the channel regularly, we have covered the police and almost all aspects thereof on this channel for about the past 3 or 4 years now. So I'm delighted that my guest this week is Paul Birch, who for 24 years was a police officer in the Met and indeed particularly was involved in counter-terrorism. Thank you very much for coming, Paul, to speak to us. I wanted to start with somewhat in the deep end, if you like. I'm a law-abiding guy, always kept my nose clean, all of that. Always had respect for the police. It was just something that one grew up with, from an ordinary background.
Yes, indeed. Yep.
Now I have no respect for them. Indeed, I feel that they're not even on my side. Do you think I'm right?
I think at an organisational level, you could be, yes. Not necessarily the officers on the ground doing their job at the sharp end, but I think culturally, politically, you may well be right. They've taken a very political turn in recent years, and they've always been on the defensive when it comes to issues like community policing of minority communities, that sort of thing. They've always been on the defensive. But now with the advent of bodies like the College of Policing and the National Police Chiefs Council, they seem to have gripped the idea of politicisation and jumping on the bandwagon with some very trendy themes. So I think at a senior level, you will be right, unfortunately.
You obviously had 24 years in the force, so that means that basically you've covered the whole of this century.
Pretty much,
in policing. Was it a different beast in 2000 to now?
It was a different beast. They were looking to change aspects of their culture. I joined in the aftermath of the Macpherson report, which, as I'm sure many of your viewers will know, the Metropolitan Police chief at the time, Paul Condon, admitted or took ownership of the idea that the Metropolitan Police was institutionally racist after the murder of Stephen Lawrence in 1993. So the organisation, even before that, I mean, even before I joined, you could see watching the news, it was very, very, I talk about the organisation, there are 43 police forces in England and Wales. But the organisation in the round at a very, very senior level, there's a lot of interaction at senior level with groups like the NPCC and the College of Policing. So when I say the organisation, I could be talking about the Met or all the other police forces as well. But the police as a whole, I think, were very defensive about issues of race. And one can understand that after, looking at the very, very fractured relationship between the police and certain communities in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And that led them, I think, at a senior level, to be unable or unwilling to push back on pushback relating to any criticism whatsoever. If a media outlet would say jump, they would say how high. They wouldn't say, well, hang on a moment. We appreciate we've done some things wrong. However, we don't think X, Y, and Z. We think that's going too far. But they never did that. They never have. Yeah. They never, and they don't now. They still don't.
Hello. Please excuse this brief interruption, but I'd be really grateful if you could please hit the subscribe button and subscribe to our channel. Our mission is vitally important, and we must grow this channel to ensure that our content reaches the biggest possible audience. The best way to do this is for you to subscribe. It's totally free. And in addition to subscribing, if you're able to donate or join our membership scheme, please click on the link in the description or visit our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. We've got great plans ahead, but we can't do it without your support. From only £4 per month, you'll receive a range of perks and benefits, including exclusive content. Thank you. Do you think then the Macpherson report, because I think that at the time people said this, of course they were poo-pooed, that the damage done to it would be huge, because by calling something racially, institutionally racist, you could never ever prove that.
No, and I think
linger, wouldn't it?
No, exactly. And it's like institutional racism. It's like systemic racism. It means you can't find any evidence.
Yeah.
So therefore, whatever evidence or whatever lack of evidence people point to, you can say, oh, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? That's so systemic that you would say that. You know, even now treating people equally, to be sort of treating people under the law is now being seen as racist. You've got to treat people differently depending on their cultural background, their racial background. So you're asking what, PCs on the street to be social anthropologists? It's ridiculous.
This has actually been reinforced recently, hasn't it, by the sentencing body that's basically said that basically people with protected characteristics should be treated differently in sentencing.
Yeah, so minorities. So if they're part of a protected minority under the Equality Act, then they're more likely to receive a pre-sentence report than someone who isn't. But that sort of paints a picture of a minority of people from different ethnic backgrounds in areas that are largely predominantly white, who are the majority. Well, in places like London, Birmingham, you're talking about millions of people who are going to be treated differently compared to what would be a minority in that area. So they flipped it completely on its head in a bid to sort of look good and be seen to be doing the right thing, whatever that is. And the police, the judiciary, I think they've been captured by this stuff. They've been completely captured by it. When I joined, to go back to your previous question about I've seen it change in the last 24 years. When I joined, this was in 2001. The first, I was one of my first days in the classroom. We all had these massive ring binders in front of us, really thick. It was done on paper then. Probably the last generation to do it on paper with pens and quaint things like that. The first page you opened, there was a map of the UK. Well, you'd think it'd be something about crime, something about the history of the police, but no. There was a map of the UK with arrows all over it, like the titles of Dad's Army.
Yes.
And it had words like, next to each arrow, it had like Angles, Saxons, Vikings, Normans, Jews, Huguenots, Celts. And there was some meaningless blurb underneath it, which basically stated that we're a nation of migrants, we're all in this together. It's all modern Britain is a sort of a mixing bowl of ethnicities and backgrounds, nothing to do with crime, nothing to do with policing. And like day one, page one, you're met with basically some propaganda. And this was 2001. And it hasn't got better. I can assure you it didn't get any better. So it's only got progressively worse. I think the Cameron government, specifically with Theresa May as Home Secretary, has sped that up. I think the Met, certainly I can only speak for the Met really in this instance, the Met, they were making changes. They were bringing changes in gradually to make it more reflective of London. And I think basically the Home Secretary at the time said that you're not going fast enough. So they've just sort of gone into sort of on steroids now, and noticeably more differently since 2020 and the death of George Floyd.
Well,
Everything changed after
I think
that.
there was something very sort of emblematic about that, with the picture of the policeman taking the knee. They tried to just, at the time, I was in the London Assembly at the time, and so it was COVID going on, and we had this going on. It was clear to anyone watching that there was this thing which we now talk about, which is sort of being two-tier policing, right?
Yeah.
Now, do you think that is a thing?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Not long before I left the organisation, I was at a leadership class. You have to have these mandatory regular leadership classes where they sort of instill the latest sort of propaganda, down from the Politburo, and you have to learn these, we're all racists or all misogynists or what have you. And the facilitator of this class, I don't think they'd ever done it before, they said, stick your hands up if you think two-tier, because we were having a class discussion about two-tier policing. And they said, stick your hand up if you think two-tier policing is a thing. Mm-hmm. And every single person stuck their hand up.
Really?
And these were all police officers.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it ranged from people thinking there are many tiers of policing, not just two, so like a wedding cake of police priorities, people were quite reticent about what they were saying, because you can say certain things in the organisation now and get you into trouble. It's still things that are centre right, and you can people talk in hushed tones in the office. They don't like to talk about it, but people were saying of the opinion that police do treat people differently depending on the circumstances of the gathering, the protest, who the victim of the crime is, who the suspect is, etc., etc. And that's they're police officers. But I think when you hear senior officers say now we police without fear or favour, I mean that's blatantly untrue. I mean they might genuinely believe it, but they're very, very badly mistaken.
Yes, I mean, I remember in that particular case, I mentioned there the BLM protest, but there were also certain sort of, around about that time and after, there were certain protests, for example, by Just Stop Oil and the ecology people. And I remember one particular instance, these people got very near to the cenotaph. Yeah. Very near. And the eco people, they could put their sort of like banner along by the centre. And I remember asking Cressida Dick as it was, and how the hell could that happen? Why did you not shush them away? And one sort of felt that it was almost like there were certain causes which were somehow better than others. Yeah. Not just people, in other words.
No, I don't. I'm not sure that senior police officers are ideologically driven. Some may be, because to get to those levels now, you have to go through the university system. I think 3 out of the 4 current methods of joining the police, you have to have some sort of degree. Yeah. And, the education system is generally left-leaning.
Did you have a degree, by the way?
No. No. And I think more police officers maybe should have life experience. I joined quite late. I was in my early 30s when I joined. And I'd had a bit of life experience. And I think that counts for more.
Exactly.
And traditionally the police used to recruit from, or you had ex-servicemen, service people. Not so much now, and you need a degree pretty much just to get in, or you get a degree in policing, whatever that means, while you're in. But so you soak up all this sort of dogma. So by the time you get out on the streets, you're programmed. And I think a lot of senior officers, they either believe in it, I'm sure some do, but if they don't, if they're a bit more pragmatic, they're just thinking of the potential media backlash from a media which is left-leaning. Yes. When picking the cenotaph as an example, if they get out a load of big sticks and hit people going to the cenotaph, and they're Just Stop Oil people, excuse me, of a certain background, a certain affluent background, certain age. We see a lot, many of them seem to be at least in middle age or maybe older. very middle class. There'd be, I'm not suggesting they should hit people like that, obviously, but there would be if they were robust with them, there would be a backlash. And this has certainly happened, when football supporters want to get to the cenotaph and protect it, as they see it, against BLM supporters, in the wake of the cenotaph being criminally damaged, Churchill statue being criminally damaged, and when they want to get to it, they got the helmets, the shields, the big sticks, and they wade in, even when people have kids with them. They go, no one's going to stick up for these people because they're white and they're working class.
Yes, exactly.
No one, they'll just be, if anyone speaks up on their behalf, they'll be dismissed as sort of racists.
Yes.
Or supporters of racists, of Nazis, or, the perennial Nazi allegation being thrown at people. So they know that no one in a position of authority or power, up until relatively recently, would stick up for them. So they know they can go in a much tougher fashion against people like that than, say, BLM, Just Stop Oil, and you saw it again against people, anti-vax protests. They were treated much more harshly around the same time as well.
The irony, of course, is that the police, one of the great strengths of the police in this country was that they were drawn from the community that they were there to help and police. They were drawn from working class people on the whole. I mean, without wishing to be too sentimental about it, weren't they? It was sort of the whole idea of consent, because they came out of that community.
The policing by consent, having the police from the community, policing the community it comes from, is one of the key Peelian principles from 1829, when the Met was founded. So that's part of the police's constitution, if you like. But they've long since forgotten that, I think. And I know they want people who reflect the communities which they serve. I can sort of understand that. But, I've spoken to many people from the communities which we served, and they would much rather have someone that's going to do a decent job than have someone that looks like them.
Yes.
It's very, very patronising.
Yeah.
And more than a little prejudiced, I think. And it's same for my colleagues from ethnic backgrounds. Whenever there was a photo opportunity to go in, a parish magazine, a local authority's website, it's always the female officers, the minority officers, or from different backgrounds, and they know why they've been chosen for a photo op, and
I think the thing is, I just want to ask you something which is perplexed. Well, I say perplexed me, but was, when you have an instinct about something and it could be totally wrong. If you take the Gaza demonstrations in London, huge demonstrations, hundreds of thousands of people, I think, at one point. The demonstrators largely allowed to get away with things like jumping all over armed monuments, all of that. And also, for that matter, shouting and screaming certain things, extremist things, from the river to the sea on Big Ben.
Yes.
When I look at it, or even if you then tie that to the Manchester airport incident recently, the conclusion I come to is that somehow there's been some kind of tacit kind of directive gone out: do not provoke the Muslim community. That's how it seems to me. That in fact, actually, we've got to contain what could be otherwise absolutely, the tinderbox going up.
Yes, I can see that.
Does that sound far-fetched to you?
No, I don't think it is. I think at some levels the senior management are aware that there is. They all see it as one Muslim community. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of different Muslim communities. A community from South Asia, a South Asian background, will behave in a different way to someone of Somalian background or Moroccan background or what have you. But they just see it as one sort of homogenous mass of millions of people. And I think, again, it comes down to a lack of will to deal with the problem. Right. And I know you're completely right. At these demonstrations, certainly people had banners on which breached the Terrorism Act.
Yeah.
Support for Hamas is a clear breach which is a proscribed organisation, a clear breach of UK terrorism legislation. Some were arrested, some have been charged, but comparatively few compared to the amount of people who were possibly breaking the law. I mean, as you say, these demonstrations were huge and there were so many people, but a very small minority have been arrested and charged.
Yeah.
And I think, I guess the senior officers are just the same as us. They read the news, they look on the internet, they see what happens when someone criticizes aspects of Islam or shows some, unbelievably shows some cartoons and ends up being beheaded in the street, like Samuel Paty in France. And that's got to be in the back of people's minds. That's got to be in the back of police officers' minds at senior level when they make a strategy. And another thing to be said about those demonstrations when they're at their height, what the police used to do years ago, they would have lots of public order trained officers sat around the corner in carriers waiting to go if things got a bit lively. They haven't done that with these demonstrations, and there could be many reasons for that. One would probably be cost. To bring several hundred officers in on their rest days or on a bank holiday, you'd have to pay them a lot of money, and I think cost is always a factor. And another one could be that they don't want to be seen to be oppressive now.
Yeah.
They want to be much more touchy-feely. So you've got these officers, like, fewer than 5 officers, at a street corner where hundreds of thousands of people are going past. They're all shouting from the river to the sea, or they're waving banners which support Hamas. And then, a gold or silver commander back in the control room will say, go and grab that bloke and hike him out because of his banner. And you are surrounded by a sea of hostile people, and you're putting these officers in a terrible position, an absolutely terrible position. And of course, everyone's got a camera phone now and uploads images onto the internet in seconds. So the police being a little reticent, a little hesitant, or asking nicely for someone to go, or when someone, as did happen on one of these, someone who's anti-Hamas waves a banner at them and provokes the crowd, they end up hiking him away. Rather than dealing with the people who are threatening the man with physical violence. Because it's just easier.
Well, that happened, didn't it? It was a video.
Yeah. I think. Yes. He became quite famous at one point. I think he did it a few times. But they're put in an absolutely shocking position because the seniors are more concerned about saving money, or they don't want to offend people. You'll see it at Notting Hill now with the public order officers, TSG officers. They've got baseball caps on, they've got their riot helmet, their public order helmet clipped to their belt. Now when things start being thrown around, like bottles, stones or whatever, they've got no head protection. But they've been told by the people in the control room, the seniors in the control room, don't put those helmets on because it looks intimidatory. And yet they wouldn't think twice at a football match.
Oh, of course not.
You were saying there are people wanting to be more sort of touchy-feely. One of the expressions of that surely is this thing called community policing.
Yes.
And I think it was last year during the civil disturbances last year, we had these extraordinary interviews with sort of, I suppose, middling cops or senior, basically saying we're talking to the local community about how they want to be policed. I mean, what do you think when you see
Well, Andy Marsh, he's either head of the NPCC or the head of the College of Policing. He said only this week that police should feel they're able to do their job much more efficiently if they feel appreciated. I'm paraphrasing here, but they need to feel appreciated to do their job. And he was addressing two-tier policing, so he was saying, well, hopefully 80% of people in the middle think we're doing a good job. I mean, there's there's a bit to unpack there. So he's not really concerned about what amounts to 40% then, who probably don't think they're doing a good job, and this sort of need to be loved by people. The police will be respected if they do a good job. You know, they're trying to be everybody's friend. Well, not everybody's friend. You know, there are clearly groups and communities who they don't really care about being on the good side of, but they try so hard to be the friend to every minority community, different genders, different races, sexualities, whether people are disabled or not. And if you think of the amount of, certainly in London, the amount of different cultures, I mean, this city's changed inordinate a lot.
Yeah.
A lot in the last 20 years. I mean, when I came into London to work, I worked.
Are you a Londoner, by the way, originally?
Originally, yes.
Oh, you are? Where are you from?
Well, Green.
Oh, right.
Yeah, from North London originally, and I policed in North London.
Right.
And my family are all originally from like Islington, Holloway, Finsbury Park. The community was largely, the minority communities were African Caribbean, and Wood Green, it wasn't really a minority, it was a large community, South Asian and Turkish, Kurdish. Whereas now, there are communities literally from all over the world. And so if you're asking police officers to treat every group slightly differently to the other one, again, like I said before, you're asking them to be social anthropologists on top of doing their job. And that's just putting them in a ridiculous position. It's a hard enough job as it is. And the more they try to professionalise it with colleges of policing, etc., they actually make it harder to do the job. They make it less professional. They make it more vulnerable to ridicule and criticism. And so with the different communities, the whole idea of equity is to appreciate that different people have different circumstances that gets them in front of you at that minute, at that moment. How they got there, person A is going to be different to person B, C, D, etc. And that's just clearly ridiculous to try and ask the officer to think, okay, how am I going to treat that person as opposed to that person? Surely it would just be easier to treat everybody equally without fear or favour, going back to the original principle.
Yes.
And, that surely is easier. But no, that's not what they want.
One of the sort of cliches that we hear about the police when people complain about the police is it's not your average guy on the ground. It's the seniors.
Yeah.
Have to say that at least in my experience as well of dealing with people that are nearer to the ground as well, I'm not quite so sure about that anymore. But do you think that it, in the sense that you alluded to it, that they all seem to have taken on board a certain kind of set of attitudes, and you just feel instinctively that they're not going, they're not on your side effectively. Do you think that is justified or not really? Do you think it is basically a senior thing, that basically the police on the beat, as it used to be called, just simply have to go along with this, that it's imposed on them?
Yes, I think so. They would have all been through an education system which is largely left-leaning. Excuse me, as I mentioned earlier, through a university probably that is left-leaning. And they're entering an organisation now which is culturally left-leaning. And they know that if they want to get on in the organisation, they're going to have to subscribe to this stuff, and they're going to have to put it into practice and be seen to be putting it into practice, because if you want to go for promotion or lateral progression, then you have to evidence what you've done previously. DEI type practices are very much part of the sort of the kit you have to have with you in order to get promoted, in order to move on in the organisation. And the people who are at senior level already subscribe to that, or they pretend to, or they do while they're at work, because some of the people who are in senior ranks now, they've probably been in the job long enough to have been around when it wasn't quite as such. So, and I've had a pint with some of them after work on occasions, and they don't subscribe to. Some of them don't subscribe to it at all. They appreciate that they've got to, if they want to get on, they've got to sort of grip this stuff and implement it.
Yeah.
They don't agree with it privately, and so they're living a sort of professional and personal lives. They're like two different people.
Who was the last Met Commissioner that you have admiration for, do you think, Paul?
Oh.
I mean, it's quite, we're talking, how many have there been during your period in the police? About five, maybe? Five?
Yeah, there would have been, I think about five. I don't think I could
We had
name.
Bernard Hogan Howe.
Yeah, it wouldn't be him.
Cressida Dick. We've got this guy now. Sorry, what's his name now?
Mark Rowley.
Yes, Mark Rowley.
Was John Stevens the Met Commissioner in the early 2000s?
Yes.
Probably him.
Yes.
Cressida Dick, I think, internally did a lot. I mean, she's clearly a very, very intelligent human being, and the stuff she's done, particularly in counter-terrorism, has been phenomenal. The decision she had to make just like that is incredible, and I take my hat off to anyone who does that. Internally, like she was. I think she was well liked and respected within the organisation. She was seen as someone who probably stuck up for the police more than some of the others. Hogan Howe, I think, was just brought in to implement swinging cuts. Yeah, no, he was just a bully.
You were involved in counter-terrorism. Can I ask what was your involvement?
I did various jobs within CT in my time. Without going into too much detail, I was part of the team that coordinated the movement of operational teams around the country,
right,
depending on which job was the highest priority in which area. I performed a role which intelligence gathering role and community engagement role with Muslim communities across London. And latterly I was part of a team which is very pertinent to today's culture, looking at internet-based material,
right,
whether it breached the Terrorism Act or not. So we were looking at those demonstrations quite a bit, and the public could refer material into us, and a lot of people were quite justifiably exercised by what they saw in those demonstrations and referred the content and footage into us, which we assessed, and then if we felt it breached, then we would put a package together and sort of send it on up the chain. And obviously with the whole online safety bill, the idea of legal but harmful, we were very much drawn into the debate over that. But ultimately it wasn't our decision as to, we were part of we were part of this sort of steering group with the Home Office when they were starting to look into that legislation.
Yeah.
But ultimately that wasn't our decision to make. We could opine, we could sort of give an idea of how it would impact us, but ultimately it's a decision for other people. So
when it came to sort of the broader discussion about terrorism, which is not, but I wonder what the police's involvement is, that essentially the biggest threat would be Islamist inspired terrorism. But certainly during my time on the Assembly, and I think, now, there is this constant pushing of a kind of far-right threat.
Yes.
Did the police also consciously push that as a way of somehow trying to equalise in some way?
Yeah, there is a threat. There is the right-wing threat. And in my time within counter-terrorism policing, a lot more resource and energy went into that.
Yeah.
But, there's a greater propensity for those people to be kids in their bedroom churning out offensive material.
Right.
Rather than people who want to plan a mass casualty attack or drive a car into loads of people in a Christmas market. There is more resource going towards that now. I know at a political level they do try and sort of make out that there's an equivalence
Yes.
in terms of danger to the public, and there isn't.
It's something like 95% is Islamism.
I think at least 80% is Islamist, and in terms of the investigations which end up in an arrest and a charge, it's even higher. It's a lot higher. So there is no comparison really. However, when that largely a myth, I think, is perpetuated through the culture, it reflects in the amount of people refer to prevent.
Yes, of course.
So that is much more balanced. I think at one point I read that even a majority of kids that were referred to prevent were being referred to because of right-wing culture, their sympathies with the far right, whatever that means. And now we see it in dramas with young working class lads being potential incels and being influenced
You mean
by
like
people
in
like
this-
Andrew Tate.
And this adolescence program.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm interested you point that out, because that's a police procedural, isn't it? That whole thing.
Yes.
And it seemed to me that whilst it was very well made and all of that, it was almost like, you sort of had this. Here's this huge problem we have, but look over here at this one instead.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you only have to look at the knife crime statistics in London. The people who are much more likely to be the victims are young black men and black boys.
Yeah.
They're much more likely to be, I think, up 24 times more likely to die violently by the time they get to adulthood. I mean, address it. Someone address it.
Yeah.
They don't. They make a drama. As you say, I haven't seen it, but I've read a lot about it. There's a lot of hysteria out there. And I think that Stephen Graham was partly inspired by the tragic murder of the girl on near a bus in Croydon last year.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah.
But the kid was black, wasn't he? The young.
Yes. Well, if you look at the suspect photo, he didn't look like the kid in adolescence. That's all.
No.
But they're not. They're not going to.
Yeah.
They would never portray it that way.
Yes, but you see, this is we say that, and we say it quite glibly. Of course, they're never going to do. But actually, when you think of it, really, it is appalling that actually we accept that situation.
The people being betrayed, they're being let down.
Yeah.
Those communities that these people purport to represent are letting them down, and they're dying almost every day, and no one does anything about it. And there's even more, that stop and search get put into the spotlight even more, and understandably, officers are reluctant to stop people of a certain background in case they end up on a disciplinary where they know they'll be hung out to dry. No one, I'd put money on anyone in the organisation, in the job, being confident that they're going to be looked after if a disciplinary comes their way. People are sacked for the most spurious, ridiculous of reasons.
Yes.
And that again is a reaction, I think, at senior level, at policy level, to the understandably horrific crimes of someone like Wayne Couzens or David Carrick. But again, rather than just say, we appreciate, there are some issues here, they seem to just go the whole hog and just throw the book at everyone for doing anything at all. Yeah. And so you get officers who, and I don't blame them, who are very, very reluctant to stop and search people, especially now as everyone can upload some content onto the internet and selectively post things. So they could be hung out to dry, and people have been hung out to dry. And those very communities are the ones who are being let down.
It's a bit of a 64,000. Actually, that's way too cheap these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
The $64,000 question, in a way, Paul. But we've gone through quite a lot. What has to happen, do you think, I'm talking like structural changes, abolishing this, abolishing that, whatever you like. What would you like to see happen to the police or the Met Police, which is the one that you were in, to actually correct the situation we have now?
Wow.
If you were asked in by the government,
College of Policing, first, you've started for town. That one comes up all the time as being this College of Policing, their set of guidelines, aren't they, essentially?
Yeah.
But when was it started, even?
Under the Cameron government. It came in with other great wheeze, such as the Police and Crime Commissioners, the National Crime Agency. It's when they abolished ACPO, the Association for Chief Police Officers, which was essentially a private company. And they replaced it with the NPCC, the National Police Chiefs Council, the College of Policing, and they had brought in crime commissioners as well. I think I've spoken before about the police being this stuff being too much ingrained now, so it can be the organisation can be changed from within. I think
it can't be. You mean it can't?
No, I don't think it can be. Right. I think it only can be changed from without. So there needs to be a governing body, but I would abolish the College of Policing straight away.
Right.
Non-crime hate incidents were a product of the College of Policing, not government legislation. No politician ever thought of that. It was the College of Policing that came up with it, and we know the amount of damage that they've caused to people and still do. And the College of Policing is you read some of their stuff on their website now. It's just like social activism.
Yeah.
So they need to go. There needs to be a police chiefs council of some description, I guess. But I would certainly get rid of the College of Policing, police and crime commissioners. Certainly get rid of the requirement that people need a degree to be a police officer. Make it much more traditional. People who have got some common sense about them, rather than, they're there because of who they are, not what they represent.
Yes.
And just take the politics out of it. I'm sure loads of people have said that over the years, but total root and branch restructuring of the police, back to basics, but a much more community, street-based policing.
Do you think that all those suggestions are very interesting, but with this, the idea of Bobby's on the beat, which people always talk about at every election, basically.
Yes.
What are the serious chances of us going back to that now?
None, I would say. The Bobby's on the beat, or taking Bobby's off the beat, was a political decision made in the 60s. Yeah. To put people in cars so they could cover more area, a greater area with fewer people. And then that link was then broken with the community, and it's never recovered. I don't think it's ever recovered from that. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but the Bobby on the beat, saying hello to everyone, knowing what was going on. I mean, cliches are cliches sometimes because they're true.
Yes, exactly.
I don't think there's a chance for that to go back.
Presumably there's not too, for another demographic reason, is that it required there to be settled communities in which those police operated.
Yeah.
But everything is very transitory now.
In London it is. It's London, everything is very transitory. And it's a different city to the one it was 20 years ago. Yeah. So that'd be really, really difficult. If you have people police officers in the community, as their whole job is to work in the community, there'd be less need to have these sort of self-appointed community leaders who often have an agenda of their own. And we seem to say the police seem to just agree with everything they say, rather than just rather than even challenge them in the most polite way. They just say, well, he's got to be right, he's a community leader, let's do what he says.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's not right at all. They have their own agendas, they've got their own political, spiritual beliefs. If you have police in the community 24/7, then that would negate that power a little bit. I'm not saying you shouldn't have community leaders, but you've got to look at it in the round. You just don't take what all the self-appointed leaders say as gospel. I think, I don't know. I mean, we lived through 14 years of supposedly right-wing government. And the police became more and more political under that. And I think Theresa May was one of the most political Home Secretaries. I mean, obviously political, but ideological Home Secretaries. And it never really changed. And it's all very well. They go on about it now. but in opposition. But
Yes. Do you think, finally, do you think that it's true that the police have lost control of the streets?
In some areas they have, I think. Well, they seem to run away from protests. The one in Leeds, where a Roma, I think, child was going to be taken into care, the community kicked off, the police ran away, and I think the child wasn't taken into care in the end. So, the obvious...
Well, I've even noticed with, there's been a number of incidents, not many, admittedly, but where there have been attempts to deport illegal migrants or whatever, people are not... And you can see that there's enough of a demonstration around the police vehicle for them to actually just back off. In other words, that they just, they basically do surrender, actually, their authority in a way.
I think that can happen and has happened. I think in order for that to change, the seniors need to be much more robust, maybe have more people there at the time. We've seen it with immigration officers as well, with people on aeroplanes trying to deport people. They've been intimidated off. They need to have more backbone, just more backbone, do their job.
Exactly.
I keep saying it's 24 years, a long time. The police, they're not social workers. They are there to be robust when they need to be, and they're not. And the more they lose respect, and the more that sort of supine behaviour is filmed, the more it empowers people to do what they do. So you'll see more incidents like this. Or have more police officers. That's another thing. I know the previous government were quite proud of the 20,000 police they recruited, but it's only to replace the ones they got rid of in the first place. There's always an argument to have more police officers.
And I think it should be a police force, should it not?
Yes, of course.
Not a police service.
No, it should be a police force. I mean, they just...
Look, Paul, thank you so much. I just want you to stay with me, and just there's a couple of questions I just want to ask you for our members, if that's right. But for the time being, thank you very, very much for coming. It's been fascinating, actually. Thank you
very much.
That's Paul Birch there. We shall see you next week. In the meantime, have a good week, won't you? Our mission at the New Culture Forum is and always has been to defend and celebrate Britain's history, culture, and its people, and indeed Western civilization, at a time when both are under sustained attack. We have grown from small beginnings to become the country's most influential right-leaning cultural think tank. Our content is watched and read by some of Britain's most influential political figures. But now, we need your help. If you believe in what we do, then please do become a member. For as little as £4 a month, you can make a vital contribution to what we do. As a member of the NCF family, you will help ensure that we can continue to produce quality content online, such as our 3 weekly programmes, Whittle, which is our flagship interview show, Newspeak, our panel discussion show, and Deprogrammed, which is targeted at Britain's youth. As you probably know, in addition, we produce important documentaries, such as our critically acclaimed 6-part series, The West, a stunning celebration of the history and genius of Western civilization, and our ongoing documentary series, Heresies, with hard-hitting episodes tackling subjects such as immigration, gender ideology, and BBC bias. But the New Culture Forum is much more than a YouTube channel. We don't just complain about Britain as it is, we provide real solutions and clear policies on how we can push back against the madness and restore sanity to this nation. Our presenters are now highly sought after and have become familiar faces across the media. Our prestigious annual Smith Lecture and our regional and indeed national conferences have attracted world-class speakers. Perhaps most importantly, we are the only organisation on the right of politics that has launched a national movement without actually being a political party. And uniquely, through our NCF Locals programme, we've established some 30 active branches in towns and cities right across the nation, from Edinburgh to Exeter, and with many more on the way. We're very proud of what we've achieved, and our members have made it possible. In return, our members receive access to exclusive content, invitations to private events, free or discounted tickets to our conferences and lectures, free copies of our books, and much more. I very much hope that you'll join us too by clicking the link in the description or going to our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Now is the time that we need your help. Thank you.